I often get asked, do I need a shareholders agreement from the outset when there's more than one shareholder? And it's interesting, if I just have a couple of co-founders who own 50% each or three who own a third each, I can deal with most of the things the three of you need or two of you need in the founders agreement, because it really just deals with how you're going to deal with your shares if one of you leaves, especially where all the founders are on the board. What becomes more problematic is when we get into more than a couple of people, and shareholder agreements are needed, but there's other protections that are needed, especially when you start to give out stock options or issue shares to either advisors or employees. Let me talk about what a stock option plan is and how it works. With a stock option plan, you basically are setting aside for future issuance a pool of shares. The way people get those shares is at the outset to be granted a stock option. And a stock option is basically a right at a later date to purchase shares in the company. Now, how does it work? Let's say you and two friends are co-founders in a business and we've issued you each 250,000 shares. So that's 750,000 shares in total. And let's say you come to us and say, we're going to bring on a bunch of employees. We're bootstrapping our company. We don't have outside finances, but we're going to be hiring 5 or 10 people who are going to work with us. So we ask, how many options do you think you might need to help lure those people and provide incentive? One of the things you need to do when you consider how many options you want to set aside for a stock option plan is to ask yourself, what time frame do I want to maybe issue these options? Am I going to raise money a year or two from now and I just need a few options? And I want to remind you of something. People get very confused about how shares work generally. There's only ever 100% of the company. We can issue 100 million shares, but it always adds up to 100%. So be very careful when thinking about the early stock options and the early stock option plan, how many options you want to issue to your early employees. Obviously, if someone is a significant hire, if someone you can see would not only run sales when you have no revenue, but run sales when you have 10 million in revenue, you might have to give them options of 1 to 3% of your company. But if you're bringing on a bunch of developers who are just helping you develop, it may be very inappropriate to give them anything more than a nominal number of shares, because once you give away 1%, that 1% is gone forever. The other question I get asked a lot is, how do these options vest? So how they typically vest is someone gets a right to acquire. You always want to issue the option at fair market value, otherwise there's negative tax ramifications, which we've discussed in other portions of our talk. But once you understand the fair market value, which when you're bootstrapped usually is very low, you grant an employee an option, and typically that option can be exercised over a given period of time, typically over 2 to 4 years. We always suggest that unless someone is earning the option in exchange for their sweat equity, in other words, that's their work, that they not vest any options for at least a year. So if you have an employee or a number of employees who you're now looking to build a stock option plan for, we typically suggest that the first year of the grant, there be no vesting. So if they leave the company, they don't get to exercise any of the shares. But after the first year, which is called a 1-year cliff, we then suggest vesting happen monthly or quarterly over the next 2, 3, or even 4 years. So you might have a 3 or 4 year plan. Employees can start to exercise when you grant them the option a year after the first grant, and they can continue to exercise throughout the vesting period. We always suggest that the options remain outstanding for at least 5 to 7 years so that employees aren't forced to exercise. And typically, employees won't exercise until there's a liquidation event or some event that's going to give them the cash proceeds from the profits of that exercise. The other time we see employees typically exercise is where they got a very low-priced option and they're leaving the company. And for many reasons, they want to spend that money, that couple $1,000s, to exercise those options because they think it might be worth something in the future.